12 assemblymen have been elected and sworn in to the Tobago House of Assembly, but a People's National Movement-led THA Executive Council remains, and the legislative arm has not been installed, as voting for a presiding officer and chief secretary ended in another stalemate. The 6 PDP and 6 PNM representatives took their oath of office before President Ptolemy Weeks and other dignitaries at the Magdalena Grand Resort on Thursday. The Prime Minister was not present. In her brief address, President Ptolemy Weeks congratulated the elected politicians. She said, as the world faced the unprecedented, Tobago too faced the same in this THA elections.
Unprecedented is not a bad word. Of course, it brings with it its challenges and trials, but it also brings opportunities. Opportunities to reimagine and re-engineer how we do business. And it gives us a wonderful opportunity to think whether or not we can serve better.
Following a short ceremony, all eyes and ears were then locked to the Assembly legislature for the election of a presiding officer and chief secretary. The People's National Movement nominated Ingrid Melville, while Julian Skeet was the Progressive Democratic Patriots' choice. After 4 rounds, 2 through secret ballots and 2 open, the vote remained at a deadlock. The Clerk of the House then highlighted the legislature exhausted Standing Order 3 and was about to adjourn the sitting when the PDP's Deputy Leader, Fali Augustine, asked for consideration of Standing Order 92.1 of the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament.
Of a ballot referred to in paragraph 9 of this standing order, the votes remain equal. The clerk must determine by lot which candidate is to be eliminated. So given that the standing orders of the Tobago House of Assembly is silent on the matter of how to break a deadlock, our standing orders 92.1 actually requires that we look at the national standing orders, and therein exists provision.
Clerk of the House noted she was not prepared to consider the point raised. The PDP deputy told reporters that the party made the proposition based on legal counsel. He said they view it as the only fair method to resolve the matter in a timely manner, adding that he was willing to accept it if the casting of lots resulted in the PNM's favor.
Given that there is actually a mechanism that we have found, what we are saying is that we ought to use the mechanism that is available to us. That's it. Period. Use the mechanisms available to us. That's it. And that's why we are going to pursue this matter the legal way, because they may have one opinion. Their lawyers have obviously missed some elements, but we will ensure that the court will have the final say.
The PDP added that the Clerk of the House did not complete Thursday's proceedings by law, noting that the standing order indicates that she expected or was expected to continue calling the votes ad nauseum. As such, Mr. Augustine said a letter would be sent to her explaining such and calling for a reassembling of the House. Meanwhile, the People's National Movement says the legal advice they received indicated that this is not suitable. Chief Secretary Ansel Dennis, speaking on the matter, said it was against the law and his preference is to take it to the Parliament and finalize the autonomy bill for Tobago.
Allows us to fast-track the autonomy bill, and that is great. The autonomy bill actually proposed 15 electoral districts, which is ideal because it's an odd number, and therefore it's unlikely to end up in a tie. But that bill is before the Parliament at this point in time. I'm not sure how long again it will take for us to get it through that. So failing that, then we could look at a second option, which would be minor adjustments to the Tobago House of Assembly Act to get us out of this situation. Whether the lot go in favor of the PNM or the PDP, my position is that that would have been illegal.
Assemblyman Ansel Dennis says he hopes it could be resolved within a 6-month period, while he agrees that the situation should not go on for too long. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, Ansel Dennis, and his previous executive remain in office until the impasse in the THA is settled. On Thursday, the process to elect a presiding officer could not be completed after 4 rounds of votes. Weighing in on the matter, Prime Minister Rowley said, "We are a functioning democracy, a functioning parliament. What we do not have is a functioning assembly, but we do have a functioning executive, and that executive stays in place. He referenced parliamentary elections in Trinidad and Tobago, where ministers stay in office until a prime minister is selected.
Tobago, that the Executive Council would stay in place to conduct the business of Tobago at the executive level, while the Parliament seeks to try to make the change that the election was to have brought about. So as of today, the PNM through Chief Secretary Ansel Dennis and his assembly team, which was there prior to election day, they will remain in office.
On the issue of fresh elections for the Tobago House of Assembly, as some political pundits are recommending, the Prime Minister said, according to the THA Act, it takes a fully constituted assembly to pass a resolution to dissolve the assembly.
Councillors are appointed by the Chief Secretary or by the presiding officer on the advice of the Chief Secretary. So if you're having difficulty choosing a presiding officer, and if you go further and having difficulty choosing a Chief Secretary, and all the way down to not being able to choose the councillors, what in effect is happening from the goalpost first is that you cannot put the assembly in place as a body required by law.
The Prime Minister said if the Parliament is required to intervene, the government stands ready. He said, however, this is a Tobago issue, and for now, he's leaving it to the THA to work it out. Meanwhile, political scientist Professor Hamid Ghani believes the only way the stalemate in the Tobago House of Assembly can be resolved is if both political parties sit together and work it out.
Forward on this is that there's going to have to be some negotiations between the PNM and the PDP. And the request for a conversation by Watson Duke with Tracy Davidson Celestin most probably is something that may have to happen. But given the nature of the political environment, it's difficult to see them working together unless there is a cooling of some of the temperature on this. But somewhere along the line, I think there's going to have to be a legislative intervention, which is going to raise hackles in Tobago about the Parliament in Port of Spain entering into the politics of Tobago to resolve a situation.